Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for attending the webinar today. We're going to talk about how effectively can we back up our branch offices, remote offices, work at home offices, and create a full disaster recovery that we can trust and is secure. Today I'm being joined by Andrew, and he's a Veeam engineer, and he can help us to understand how we can implement such a system. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Mo, and thank you all for your time today. My name is Andrew Stammworthy. I am a technical account manager specializing in Veeam, and today we're going to talk about Veeam backup and replication, as well as the Veeam agents, and how we can help manage remote data, whether it's remote offices or remote workers, which is becoming the new big thing. So first off, let's talk about Veeam's vision of cloud data management. And now this doesn't mean your data that lives in the cloud. What Veeam means here is the cloud of data that surrounds you, your customers, your data. And this can be in the public cloud, private cloud, anywhere your data lives is your cloud of data that Veeam wants to manage. And this includes the standard backup and recovery, cloud mobility of moving that data around, governance and compliance, making sure that all of your data meets whatever standards you need to, monitoring and analytics to make your data more useful to you, and orchestration and automation, making sure that when things go wrong, that we can help automate most of those processes as much as possible. And Veeam's cloud data management platform is built on universal storage APIs, and then of course the core of our infrastructure, the backup and replication. This allows us to do all those different things that we talked about: recovery, cloud mobility, monitoring, orchestration, compliance. That's all built on top of the backup and replication base. And this applies to all different types of data, whether it's in the cloud, virtual, physical, software as a service offerings. Veeam tries to encompass everything. And lastly, before we get into the nitty-gritty of our presentation today, I want to talk quickly about the 3-2-1 rule, which Veeam has expanded to the 3-2-1-0 rule. And what exactly does this mean? You've probably heard this before, but I'll go over it again. That is, we want to have 3 copies of your data. That's production plus 2 backups, 2 additional copies. 2 different media types, whether that's hard drives, cloud, tape, etc. Just so we have some differing media types that have different levels of risk and failure rates. We want to have 1 offsite copy at least. That's going to be going to some kind of remote site, whether it's another data center that you own, co-location, service provider location, or just to the cloud itself, the public cloud. And then lastly, what we've added is 0 errors. Right? None of this data does us any good if it has mistakes and errors in it. So Veeam, at its core, we're trying to do all of this backup and recovery with no errors. And so what are some of the backup challenges that you have for remote data? Well, we have a couple different places where this data might be living. Most commonly, and what you're probably most familiar with, because this has been around for a while, is remote offices. And maybe it's a second data center, maybe it's a retail store that has multiple locations, and each one of those locations has a small single server that handles customer transactions for that store, or it might be various combinations thereof. And obviously, with all of that disparate data, we need to be able to manage all of that. And also, some of the challenges we have are that backups and restorations, they're going to be a lot quicker if that storage is local. We don't want to always be sending data across the WAN to some kind of central repository, because that's going to really slow down our business. We also want to enable that we have security of those remote connections. We don't want to be sending data across the wire in an unencrypted or unsecured state. So we always want to make sure that data is encrypted whenever it transits the WAN. And then more recently we've had this burst of remote workers. With the pandemic in the last year, many companies have shifted to a remote workforce, having people work from home and managing all of these disparate systems, everyone using their personal computers or even company computers that are no longer in the office, they're now at people's homes, and that can make things very complicated from a management perspective. And really, this trend is likely to continue. A lot of companies are going to be sticking with a remote workforce and cutting down on their centralized office space. And the main challenge with this kind of data, obviously, besides just the fact that it's so spread out across so many different systems, is inconsistent connectivity. All these systems might not be online at the same time. They might not be connected to the main company internet at the same time or at specific times. So trying to manage all of those different systems, trying to make sure that they all back up on a consistent schedule, it can be very difficult. We're going to talk about why Veeam is able to help you alleviate these challenges. So let's talk about how Veeam is going to manage your remote data. One of the simplest deployments for remote systems is utilizing the Veeam's backup proxies in a remote function. This would allow you to have one Veeam backup server, whether it's at your primary site or at your DR site, and then have a Veeam proxy at all of your sites. Now, the backup proxies are what actually handle the data stream in the Veeam ecosystem. They get instructions from the backup server, and then the proxy goes and speaks with the host and processes that data and sends it to the backup repository. We can deploy proxies at separate locations, and as long as the backup server has access to them, it can still deliver those instructions. We can then assign the backup jobs in such a way that all of the data remains local to the systems that are near that proxy. That is to say that the source host on the left-hand side of this image would not be utilizing the proxy on the right-hand side of this image to send data to the backup repository on the left-hand side. Although it is possible to do that in the event that a proxy is down, for instance. We don't want to do that if we don't have to, because then we're transiting data across the WAN twice. We're sending it to the proxy on the right-hand side to be processed and then sending it back. So that can be a downfall of this type of deployment, but if it's deployed correctly, this can greatly alleviate many concerns for the remote infrastructure. We can also have just a single interface, just one Veeam server that's managing multiple locations, each with their own proxy. And we can do part of our 3-2-1 rule of sending data off-site by crossing the backups from one site to another. So sending a copy of our backups from the host on the left to the repository on the right and vice versa. That way they both have a copy locally of their backups, and the opposing site also has a copy, so that we have two copies of that data in two different locations. And we also support WAN Acceleration in this situation. So we can have two different repositories across a WAN and use WAN accelerators to greatly improve performance. These WAN accelerators enable global caching and global deduplication, as well as network compression, so that we're going to greatly improve the performance and the bandwidth utilization running across the WAN. For a more complex deployment, instead of deploying one Veeam system and then proxies at each location, we might want to deploy multiple Veeam servers and have individual deployments at each customer location or each remote site with their own repositories, their own proxies. They're all managed independently until we deploy a Veeam Backup Enterprise Manager. This allows us to manage multiple Veeam servers from a single interface. So all of them will operate independently of each other and ignorant of the other systems, but then they will all report back to this enterprise manager, which you can then use as your single point of interface with all of these systems. This can be a great option for much larger and more complex customers who have maybe multiple data centers, not just a remote office with one server where you don't really need to do much except deploy that proxy and then you can back up that data. Instead, you have a bunch of different data centers that all need to be centrally managed, but can still also manage things on their own. And neither one of these is right or wrong. It's just different ways to accomplish things based on your customer's need. And they all have their pros and cons. And now let's talk about managing our remote workers. So we talked about managing those remote offices, that remote data. Today we're seeing more and more of these work from home employees. Let's talk about how we manage those. So remote workers, with more and more employees working from home, we have data that might be on personal computers, or just it might still be a company computer, but it's no longer in the office connected to the intranet of the company. We still need to manage those. And we can do that with Veeam agents. So we have Veeam agents for Windows and Linux, and next week we're deploying the Veeam agent for Mac OS. And these can back up physical workstations, provided they meet the OS requirements, but just about every modern operating system is supported. And then we can centrally manage all of those agents from our Veeam server. So we can then back up all of those disparate systems and send them to various locations, whether it's local storage, USB storage with each employee. We can send that data to a central repository at our data center, or what we'll talk about a little bit more is a Cloud Connect providers. Managing these remote workers, again, these agents, Windows, Linux, and Mac OS, we talked about one of the main challenges here being connectivity. We have these systems that might not always be online all the time. Maybe they're off for a day, or the customer doesn't, the employee doesn't have internet. Maybe they're a traveling salesman. They go out into the wilderness of Montana or something. They don't have internet for the day. We still want to do backups on a schedule, maybe a daily backup or something like that. In the event that those systems are offline or unable to connect to their target repository at their scheduled backup time, we can enable a function called backup caching. And this allows the backup to continue and be stored locally, temporarily, and then offloaded to the target repository when the system reestablishes contact. We also have many different ways of running these backup jobs. They can be managed by the Veeam server. Generally, that's more for systems that are always online, like a server, versus a workstation, which is intermittent. And we can also trigger backups based on certain parameters, not just on a schedule, but maybe when the computer is locked, or whenever it detects the backup repository, it kicks off a backup job. And you can put restrictions on that so it's not running every single time, but maybe every 12 hours maximum. But that way you're backing up as frequently as you can, or that you want to that repository. We also want to talk about how we address security. And so Veeam is very cognizant of making sure that we have security on all the different ways that this data transits. We ensure that all data that transits the WAN is encrypted by default, and we support 256-bit AES encryption on backups and archives. For access to the Veeam servers and the agents and things, everything is usually based on self-signed certificates, although you can put in more robust certificate-based security. And for the Enterprise Manager, we support all of the above, plus SAML authentication support. So we have all these ways of ensuring that our data is encrypted no matter where it's transiting. Of course, across the WAN is generally the most important. We don't want unencrypted data transiting the open internet when it's going from that remote office or that remote worker back to our central repository. But we can also enable encryption internal networks if we want to, just to make sure that we're being extra secure, and then encrypting all those backups. In the event that you are doing a restoration from one of your encrypted backups, if you're restoring on the machine, on the Veeam server that created that backup, it is already going to retain that encryption key, so it will decrypt and restore seamlessly. So you don't need to worry about always needing that encryption key during the restoration process. It's only when that backup is put on a new Veeam server. Maybe your Veeam server went down and you're trying to restore things using a new installation, you will need to provide that encryption password to decrypt that data. And then one of the last things we're going to talk about here is Veeam Cloud Connect. So this is another option for remote systems that allows us to target a Cloud Connect repository. We can have each system directly target the central repository of a service provider such as StoneFly, instead of each system reporting back to a central Veeam instance at your main data center, for instance. This, of course, supports WAN Acceleration and supports both full remote deployments and those individual agents. They can all target Cloud Connect providers. And this is another way of accomplishing that off-site part of our 3210 rule. So we can use a cloud service provider to offload our data to another site instead of using our disparate systems. Maybe we have a remote office that doesn't have local storage, or it has very minimal local storage. We can instead target the Cloud Connect repository to store that data. And that's all I have today. Thank you very much for your time. I'll now throw it back to Mo so that he can go and talk about all the ways in which StoneFly and their appliances and their services use these things that Veeam does that I just talked about, enhances them, and makes them so much better. So take it away, Mo.
Thank you, Andrew. So Andrew explained to you guys how branch offices or remote offices, Veeam can back up and create disaster recovery system for you. The appliances that StoneFly has will complete the solution. Also, having ability to not only have different type of appliance that fits your needs, combine that with the cloud, will create a full disaster recovery solution for you, and so give you the flexibility that you need. I'm actually going to jump around these different slides I have for sake of time, and then if there's any question, please post your questions. I'll be more than happy to answer that. StoneFly started about 20 years ago, focused on a storage product. And we pioneered iSCSI protocol. So if you go to iSCSI.com, you can see StoneFly. Since then, we have been producing products which are in storage, hyperconverged appliance, backup and disaster recovery, and cloud. We produce in a backup disaster recovery, we have physical appliance, virtual appliance, and cloud appliance. And we can go through that. And the use case of each of them are different. And combination of them can be, total solution for you. The best thing to do for you, if you have any kind of project, let us know and we'll help you out to actually configure it and, propose the best combination of these three. I'm going to go on what Andrew talked about as far as the cloud. We have our appliances in a number of clouds, in Microsoft and Azure, and also StoneFly. And the differences between these appliances is that, what you're comfortable with, public cloud or private cloud, and what kind of, compliance you need to have to back up your branch offices to the cloud, or in having an appliance locally, or have both, So we offer Cloud Connect as part of Alliance technology to some of the customers to expedite this and make this transition very smooth. If you go to our website, you go to our product line, here is under backup and DR, you can see different appliances, and there are different sizes of appliance, one for main offices, bigger offices that you might have, and then you might have a smaller appliances like mini backup appliances that in this case are targeted for disaster recovery, and you can actually see the small appliance which it can be for backing up a few machines and create a disaster recovery for a few machines, all the way to tens of machines if you have it. It depends what the size of your branch office or remote office it is, and so we can accommodate for any kind of size. And they have different type of capability as far as the capacity, the performance, and ability to create disaster recovery. There are two types of things that we usually separate these two from each other. One is called backup and the other one is called disaster recovery. This is the terminology and vocabulary that we try to use. The backup for us is basically you are not spinning up anything on the appliance or the cloud, so you just it's the purpose of just having a copy somewhere, and in case there's a disaster, you'll be able to retrieve that copy and restore that copy. To us, the disaster recovery is we ability to actually spin up the virtual machines and be able to recover and have a failover type of appliance. So we provide both backup and disaster recovery as part of our local backup to any kind of sites, it being a remote site, being the main site. We provide those appliances. We also provide the virtual version of our appliance and cloud appliance. So it depends what your budget is and what you're trying to do. We can do that. If you go to the main appliance, you can see there's different type of appliances that you can get. There's a single node, a chain nodes, and things like that. Different capability that it comes within the appliance for creating disaster recovery system. Now I'm going to go actually back to our presentation and give you some idea. The typical things that it could come with the main unit, and then more the smaller version of appliance that can also accommodate some of these capability. First of all is the Veeam agent, which is running on this appliance. You can see here, and then so it contains the Veeam itself, runs here as either the engine itself or the proxy. Then there's a storage stack that we provide in our appliances, which provides the number of different tiers of storage like SAN, NAS, and object storage, and that gives you the ability to be very flexible of how you back up your stuff. For high performance, we use the SAN part. The NAS part is the shared repositories for ability to give the user direct restores and things in a remote office or a branch office. We also have immutable type of storage, which we call object storage, which you can utilize and lock down per policy. So create a kind of immutable copy of your backup, which is great for ransomwares, malwares, and viruses. So would not be able to encrypt those backups that you have. So that would be great. We also have what we call air gap system. So if you want to go a little bit farther than that, you would basically implement an air gap system within your appliance, which is, air gap is isolated storage that doesn't have a network facing. It's not network facing, so it doesn't have any kind of exposure to the network, so it cannot be easily compromised or attacked. So, and as I said, also the hypervisor could be part of this appliance, which we can actually spin up the virtual machine as you see on this one. You can also, that would be a failover appliance for you, disaster recovery appliance. We also have the sandbox system in this, so you can actually test your backup or any kind of upgrade testing or data extraction at any location. All these appliances, then they get connected, even being on a remote site, to the local or the cloud. So it's very flexible of how you can actually back up, and it depends on your bandwidth to the cloud, your requirement, RTO, RPO, recovery time objective, recovery point objective, and all that. And recovery point objective is how far the time is between your backups. So it's 5 minutes, it's 10 minutes, it's half an hour, 1 hour. How often you actually take a backup from your machines. And RTO is recovery time objective. How fast do you need to get back to your business? Means you restore. So based on RPO and RTO, we pick up different appliances. I'm going to show you a few things that we have. The appliances comes with anywhere from a 6 bay all the way to 90 bay. So for branch offices, you probably have a few terabytes, and then in bigger offices, you probably have central office that you need to centralize the whole backup. Maybe you have more terabytes and even petabytes sometimes. And very scalable. You can just add more chassis to it. It's called a scale up, or add more nodes, become scale out. As I said, we have a lot of different configurations. So in this webinar, we have time is short, and so I'm just going to go over really quick. And I'm sure when you see something that interests you, call us, and then we can go to a detail. Our appliances, as you see, it comes from very small appliance for remote. The mini backup, then it goes to the 4 bay, then 8 bay, and all the way to 90 bay in many cases. And we have different controllers: I series, D series, XS series, XD series. These are for performance, so different type of performance that you can get within our appliance, and you can have that. Well, thank you very much for attending our webinar today. There's lots of information to cover, and Andrew, thank you very much for giving us some insight about Veeam. So the takeaway today is we have number of appliances, a number of flavors of this appliance, and we can customize from very small appliance to very large installations, and we have direct integration with Veeam, and create the security, immutable storage, air gap system, and make sure everything is secure and good for you in your main office or the branch office that you have, and you need the implementation. Again, thank you very much for attending this webinar today. Please contact us in case that you want us to work with you on any project. Thanks. Bye.